Good morning. I'd like to call the regular scheduled meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. It is Monday, October 16, 2017. It is now, believe it or not, 8:30. Don't go by the clocks on the walls. For some reason, they're all wrong. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask Selectman McKelvey to lead us, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Gary. We have a large crowd here today, which was expected, and that's why we moved it to fire headquarters. Excuse me. All right, I'm going to explain to you a little bit about our agenda. It's a little bit out of the ordinary. First of all, item 2 is a public hearing to obtain comments on a proposed water main extension ordinance in accordance with section 7-137C to the Connecticut General Statutes. Now, this item is only for comments on the Water Main Extension Ordinance. I know many of you are here to discuss the SAFER grant. Comments on that will be held on item 5, which is public forum. So if you're here to express an opinion on the FEMA grant, please wait until item 5. So if you're here to express comments on the ordinance in regard to the water main, now is your chance. After we have a presentation from our attorney, Norb Church. So we'll start the public hearing on the water main only with a short presentation from Attorney Norb Church. Attorney Church, please.
Good morning, all.
Good morning. Good morning.
So what we have before us today is, and I think this will only pick up for the camera, is that right? So I'm going to...
Yeah.
All right. So what we have today is an ordinance for the water main extension. And what happens is, and we've been through the process of getting the funding approved, and at some point when the water main is built and everything is done, all of the expenses are in, that then will be the opportunity to determine what the assessment will be for each home that is served by the water main. And there are statutes that kind of govern this, and so the proposed ordinance is really pursuant to and follows a statutory scheme for how assessments are to occur. And one of the things that the statutes say is that the Board of Selectmen will adopt rules by which assessments will be determined. So the purpose of this ordinance is to adopt that rule. A few things that I can mention on it is, and I'll give you a little bit of the kind of the scenario under which this will happen. It is anticipated at this point that there will be 145 homes that will be serviced by this water main. The water main will pass by several homes that are not part of the service area. In particular, what come to mind, there's 4 or 5 homes on the lower part of Lower Road which will not be serviced. And so part of the language in here is to kind of distinguish a little bit who's in the service area and who isn't. And on the other hand, there is a possibility that perhaps some of those homeowners may, in the next 6 months, maybe in the next 6 years, maybe in the next 20 years, decide that one of them wants to hook up to the water. And the provision in here is that if the water main passes by a home that's not going to be serviced, but somebody would like to have the service later on, they would then be charged what we call a connection charge, which just so happens to be the same amount as an assessment. The other thing is that so if somebody does hook up 15 years later and pays a connection charge, that at the moment would be that amount of money. The Board of Selectmen at that time would determine whether it's paid, boom, all up front in one installment, or whether it would be paid out over some period of time. But at least for the moment, it's anticipated that under that scenario, money would go into the general fund. Now, it may be down the road a little bit, and the Board of Selectmen will work on this, that there may be some kind of a program where if there are latter payments that come in, that money might be capable of being earmarked and spent in a particular direction, perhaps such as road improvements and so forth. So that part is for another day, but what you have on the table today is just simply somebody decides that they're going to, who's not part of the service area, they want to connect into this main, they're going to pay essentially an assessment when that time comes. We call it a connection charge. Now, the other thing is the statute calls for recognizing that in some situations, water mains may pass by a farmland, or area that is designated by the assessor as being farmland or forest land or open space land or just simply not developed. So again, if the water main passes by a property such as that, I don't know that we have that in our particular project, but were to pass by that kind of an area, then assessments for that area would be deferred. So at some point in the future, if it went by a farm and then that farm got divided up into several house lots, sort of same thing again, as those house lots were developed, building permits were pulled, people wanted to connect to the water main, they would pay essentially an assessment or a service charge at that time. So the ordinance contemplates thus two situations where there can be deferrals. One where it is our intention for water main to go buy a piece of property and our intention that they are not going to be hooked up. The other is where water main goes by vacant land, farmland, forest land. Those would be the two situations where there would be deferral on assessments. Also, where there are deferrals, there would be what's called the statute calls it a caveat that would be recorded on the land records so that some future buyer, perhaps 15 years down the road, would be aware of the fact that if they want to hook up to water, that there's a notice giving them a heads up that there would be a service charge that would go with that. Another question that has come up is having to do with the statute, or the ordinance does provide for when it comes time to do the assessments. And so let me sort of just explain for a moment how we expect that will work. So if at the end of the project we end up with 145 homes that are serviced as part of the project, when all the expenses are in, everything in, every penny has been paid, we take that total expense and divide it by 145 homes, and that becomes your assessment. Now, in the statutes, there's provision for a little bit of elasticity when it comes to doing assessments, whether they're for water or for sewers or sidewalks or other things that are considered to be what the statutes call betterments. And a betterment is where a town, a municipality does some project, like building sidewalks or something, that improve a particular area, improve a particular street, a town can make those improvements and then assess you a benefit assessment for the improvements that affect just you and do not affect or serve as a betterment to the entire town. So under that scheme of betterment assessments, which is really what we fall into, there could be a situation where a property is not benefited to the extent of what the assessment would be. And I'll kind of give you an example. Let's just say that you were putting in water mains, and it's going to be $50,000 per household. And Dennis, we're somewhere in the 14 and change range. But just for purposes of the example it's a $50,000 assessment, and the water main is going to service a home that's in North Guilford, and it's a one-room shack on a very small lot where there's no ability to make the house any bigger. A property owner could come in and say, you know, my property value has improved by virtue of your providing water service to me, but my property value has not improved to the extent of $50,000. So under that kind of a scenario, the Board of Selectmen could have a hearing, could have the discretion to lower an assessment in a particular situation. One other example that I'll give you is I was involved about 20 years ago in a sewer project in the Northford section of North Branford. And it was primarily homes up there, but there was Restland Farms. And the town struggled a little bit on how much we should assess Restland Farms. And we kind of did it sort of per unit basis like you, where Restland Farms would represent 15 homes. And Restland Farms came to the town council and said, you know, for what we do, what our water usage is, what our sewer usage would be, if you did the math, we wouldn't receive that kind of a benefit. And they actually brought in an appraisal, and it really has to be done by way of an appraisal. And they demonstrated that their benefit was something less than 15 units of betterment assessment. And my recollection was that I think we ended up assessing them for 8 units. So that's the kind of scenario that we're talking about when we when the ordinance says that there are some reasonable allowances for particular situations. Those are the situations that we're talking about. And again, it has to be done by way of appraisal. And what the question becomes is, what is the enhancement of value by way of the particular betterment that has occurred? And I think that's everything that I have to say on the ordinance.
Okay.
Questions?
Any questions from the board? Mike?
Thank you. Should I come
Yep.
forward?
State your name and address, please.
Yes, Mike Mizell, 55 Marshall Avenue,
Just sit down.
Mulberry Point.
Yeah.
May I?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Select woman. We got to change that sometime.
That'd be nice.
These, I really only have 2 questions and then a couple of clarifications, which I'll start with. As it pertains to the present project only, because your discussion, your explanation was, very broad in terms of this ordinance being more or less a generic ordinance that would cover other projects. So my clarifications relate to the pending project. Is that okay with you? Okay. Is it correct that all 145 homes that are part of our project will be assessed on the proportionate basis that you described? That is, dividing the total project cost by the number of homes. That is the 145 homes. Yes?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And the few homes, I think, are Indian Cove homeowners along Lower Road who have chosen not to participate were not included in this project.
That's correct.
Okay. But as I understand the ordinance, if any of those individual owners decide later to connect, they will be assessed or pay a connection fee, I think as you describe it, in the same dollar amount as the owners in our communities who are included in the project.
Correct.
Okay. Now, the ordinance refers to deferrals, and you've explained that there are two classes of those. The one class of farmland, forest land, or open space, which we're not concerned with. Am I correct that there are no deferrals among the 145 homes in this project?
No, by virtue of being included, being part of the 145, none of those are deferrals.
Okay, great. And the intent, as I understand it, is that any of the owners, in fact, all of the owners that are abutting the water main or are otherwise connecting, for example, if they have a lot where they need an easement to connect to the water main and they go across someone else's property, everybody's going to be assessed the same dollar amount. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then I just wanted one other clarification, and this is the last question I have, and that is, if there is a later connection that's permitted to the system, and the person who asks for that connection pays the connection fee or assessment, what happens with those dollars? Do they reduce the cost? Have you decided yet how that is going to be handled equitably?
As I mentioned in my presentation, if someone connects a year after the project is done, 10 years after the project is done, their connection fee at this point would go into the general fund.
The general fund being what?
Being the big pot of money that the town has. And more specifically, to answer your question, it would not go toward reducing the assessments for the 145 homes. But having said that, it's certainly worth considering or encouraging, a few handful of homes on Lower Road, to say to the property owners, this is your chance. You can get in as part of this project. If you make us be 146 homes or 147 homes, it reduces the total assessment for everyone, because you're spreading it across a broader base. The other thing that will happen is when the water main goes past one of those homes, by way of example, for the other 445 homes, the water main could be on the left side of the street, it could be on the right side of the street, it could be in the middle, and that will be something that's determined once they're actually out there and digging, if they hit ledge or what have you. And the road's going to be quite well dug up. And while they have everything dug up, the water main will have laterals coming out from it to a curb box at the property edge for each property to be served. So once the project is done, each homeowner can then, and they pay for it. That's not part of the construction project. They would then hire a contractor who would connect their home to the curb box that is located right at the edge, right in the front of their property, right at the edge of the street. So by way of example, the handful of homes on lower part of Lower Road would not have that lateral, would not have that curb box. So 10 years from now, if one of them wanted to hook up, they would have the additional expense of having to go all the way out into the street to the water main, to tap into the water main, put in the lateral, put in the curb box. So it could add quite a bit of expense. So it's really another incentive for those who are not part of the project, if they're thinking about it at all, to get into it, because they will get that lateral and that curb box put in as part of the project.
If there is a later connection, the Board of Selectmen would have the discretion to change the ordinance, amend the ordinance, if that's what they decided to do, to apply those monies as a credit against the project, the same way we are paying and sharing the costs equally for the project.
If I can clarify this a little bit, we've had some discussion about this. A future board could, and would be my suggestion, since I'm not going to be part of one, would be to establish something like the dedicated road fund with the additional funds that future hookups would have to pay to repair these roads in the future.
Okay, so that whole issue is left for another day.
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
thanks
correct.
so much.
Okay.
And
It's
thanks
not
to the
covered
board
in
for
this
all your
ordinance
work.
right now. Okay.
Norm, thanks so much for all your work on this
Right.
project.
My name is George Verba. I'm a civil engineer. I live in Mulberry Point Road. Our house is part of this project. My question is this. We've now talked about how, properties that abut the pipeline, the water main that is going to be built. What happens if you make another main connection to this main? Like, for instance, let's assume half of Indian Cove wants to get water. So they will run a biggish pipe, connect to us, and there may be 20, 30, maybe 40 people who will want to connect. What happens to them?
So the question is, for those of you who could not hear it, is what if somewhere down the road, 5, 10 years down the road, the main is extended into another area? And the example given was such as Indian Cove. First of all, that would probably be something that would then be done directly with the water company. This is all part of the water company network. And so so a homeowners association could request the water company to do this, or the water company might continue to extend these mains on their own initiative. There's a very good chance, however, that that would not be something that would be involving the town and town funds to make happen. So there's a very good likelihood that in the future it would either be done something directly through the water company, or again, homeowners having to contract directly with the water company to have the work done. One of the nice things that we are contemplating here is the ability to pay out this expense over the course of 20 years at 2% interest. For water main extensions going forward, if you don't have the town involved to work out a payment plan such as this, should be pretty expensive.
Yes, but that's not the point. The point is that this water main that we are hopefully soon going to construct, about probably a quarter of the cost is the cost of putting a main through the Fisher property. In other words, from Sections Head Road to the lower road. There is no benefit to anybody on this pipeline except maybe in the future the Fishers. But this is quite a big cost that we are now paying for. Because remember, it's not the town who's paying for this, it's the 145 people who pay for this. Therefore, it is my contention that anybody who connects in the future to this pipeline or otherwise through another main should be assessed the same that we are being assessed, and that money should be collected, and our burden, namely to pay off our loan, should be reduced by the amount of these connections. I don't think it's fair that this goes in a general fund which is not to the benefit of us who are actually paying for this. So I think the ordinance should be amended in this respect, namely to not give you the selectmen the latitude to apply this money anywhere they want to. This money should come to us in order to reduce the loan. And anybody who connects in the future, I don't care whether it's on the pipeline or if it's somebody 500 yards away from it, should pay the same assessment fee. That would be then a fair solution, in my opinion. So I propose that this ordinance should be changed accordingly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Norbert? Isn't it true that if, say, another homeowners association, speaking to his point, another homeowners association wanted to extend the water main or whatever, wouldn't they have to go through the same process that we've been going through for how many months? I mean, they couldn't just suddenly agree to extend a water main to cover another section of town, could they?
They would have to go through the same process. I mean, assuming the town even wanted to entertain being involved in it. So in this particular situation, the town entertained the idea, we have a problem here, we have an issue, we're going to address the issue, and the assistance that you are offering at the end of the day is the assistance that you are offering is putting the money up front and having it paid back to you with interest over the course of 20 years. So one of the things is that when this is completely done, the idea is that it'll cost the town no money. All the money went toward the homeowners. At the moment, any of the deferrals, any of the connection charges would only have to do with mains as we propose to build them. And if the water company were to decide to extend any of the mains, they can do it with us or they can do it without us. They are the water provider. We will have a co-ownership of this water main with the water company for a period of years. But eventually, the ownership will completely go over to the water company. So we're really kind of serving as a facilitator to make it happen.
Well, speaking to that again, the present plans already provide for connections to Indian Cove and also up the Mulberry Point area towards Route 146. There are T's there, big ones, which would facilitate this future connection. So my question is, why should we even pay for that? I mean, this all costs money. There should be no such connection provision right now. If they want to connect later, they should dig in and cut the pipe. So I have a problem with this whole thing that there will be no payments coming to us, the 145 people, in order to reduce our loan. I think this is fundamentally wrong. I'm sorry, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Sue?
Morning.
Good morning.
Sue
Morning, Sue.
Robbins, 798 Mulberry Point Road. For the purposes of today's meeting and to move along the item on the agenda, I ask that we move forward to take a vote, or that you move forward to take a vote, and that any discussions about making amendments in the future, that we could address that in the future. In particular, where the funds would go or be allocated for.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to address the public hearing? No, I have a question. Okay, Selectmen? Yes.
You mentioned that future boards of selectmen, which probably none of us are going to be part of, have the ability to allocate this. You're going to hang in for 15 years, Charles?
We got
I'm
young here.
Have the ability to allocate it, say, and you had suggested maybe a road fund.
Right.
Do in fact that future board of selectmen have the ability to delegate or to dedicate it back to payment of the bond?
Sure.
So that would be an option for this gentleman. I mean, I can see the mechanics 15 years from now of one person adding in and the math, it becomes very immaterial, but that is an option for the Board of Selectmen.
Absolutely. Clarification, any ordinance can be amended.
And the ordinance
Okay.
may amend.
Any more discussion on this? Anybody wishing to address the public hearing? If not, I'll call for a vote to close the public hearing. Do I have a vote?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing's now closed, okay. Item 3, approval of minutes. So we got two sets, 3.1. Approval of the minutes of regular meeting.
Thank you, Norbert.
Of October 2nd, 2017. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Second. Any additions or corrections?
Joe, on
Gary?
section 11, I had requested that there be some significant information presented to us in advance about the SAFER grant, and I would like that reflected in the minutes.
Okay. Any objection? We'll add that to the minutes. Any other additions or corrections? Move that the minutes be accepted as corrected. All in favor? Aye. Aye, carried. 3.2, approval of the special minutes, meeting of October 10th, 2017. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any additions or corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries.
Tracy, stay.
Item 4, consider and take possible action on the Water Main Extension Ordinance as presented in the public hearing just concluded. Do I have a motion?
I move that we pass the ordinance as drafted.
Is there a second? Second. There's a second. Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Okay. Item 5, public forum, limited to 3 minutes on any agenda item. This would include the FEMA SAFER grant. Anyone wishing to, anyone wishing to express their comments on any agenda item, and this would include the FEMA grant, please come to the microphone and state your name and address, please. Limited to 3 minutes, please.
I'll keep it to 3, I promise.
I'll give you 3.5. How's that?
Okay. I'm Joan Stepbacker. I live at 5 Sherrill Lane on the backside of Lake Quanapag. I've been captain of the North Guilford Rescue Squad and paramedic, and also a firefighter with the North Guilford Fire Company for 15 years. As most of you have know, that the emergency services in North Guilford, there has been an increase in the delayed response services up north. Fire headquarters, which houses the career firefighters, as you know, is right here, and that's manned 24/7. Over the years, there has been a decrease in the volunteers to man the fire trucks, as well as the rescue ambulance and the air truck. Many citizens have always assumed that the building has manned personnel, but that is not the situation. It's critical that we have personnel to get to emergencies as soon as possible. Every second counts, whether it be a medical or whether it be a fire. We do not have enough firefighters, EMTs, nor paramedics to man the present vehicles that are housed at the North Guilford Firehouse/Rescue Squad. We have the building infrastructure, but we do not have the people to roll the apparatus. As a result, the citizens of North Guilford have been losing services that we should get up in the North Guilford area. The main fire headquarters, like I said, is located right here. It takes between 10 and 12 minutes for them to reach Lake Quanapag, the beach area. I've timed it many, many times. And that's a straight shot from here just to the beach area. And that's pending whether it would be longer if they were already out on another call in town or doing some other services or in training. It has taken up to 21 minutes to get to some emergencies in North Guilford. We deserve fire service and emergency services up here in North Guilford just as much as they get them downtown. We pay the same amount of taxes. I'd like to give you a little history behind what's been happening in North Guilford. Aside from being volunteer captain of the North Guilford Rescue Squad for 35 out of 39 years, in 1991 I envisioned and proposed, with a lot of opposition, that we as volunteers of the North Guilford Rescue Squad have our own building. It got approved. We added 2 bays downstairs with an office, a bathroom, with shower facilities, a galley kitchen. Upstairs, we have a large meeting hall, which most of you have been up there to see. We use this area here up north in the wintertime for the Public Works also to stay there when there's a heavy snowstorm, instead of bringing their vehicles down here and back up and so forth. The police use it because there aren't any bathroom facilities in North Guilford at nighttime, short of the little store. Also, we use it for our meetings and for our drills and for any other community activities, like the Friends of Quantipoc, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts groups use it on and off. The building was built at no cost to taxpayers. Most of the materials and work were donated. Guilford Savings Bank gave us a $75,000 mortgage, which we totally paid off with, unfortunately, as times are as they are, with employment commitments by people, military commitments, younger youth commitments, college commitments, and aging volunteers, and health problems with aging volunteers, and family commitments. We don't have enough people to volunteer anymore. We have one person responding to get the fire truck in North Guilford. Unfortunately, I'm unable to use drive the ambulance anymore due to various health problems. As a result, North Guilford no longer gets quick response times. On the upside of the situation is that you have obtained a SAFER grant, and we would like you to use this money and vote in favor to hire 8 new firefighters/paramedics, EMTs, that will be housed at the North Guilford Rescue Squad building. There's 2 bedrooms upstairs, and like I said, everything's all set to go, and that was my envision 19 years ago when I came up with this plan to build a building, that sooner or later, you're gonna have to have paid people up north. And this was the only way to do it, was to put an addition on where they'd have their own area to stay, and you'd have an ambulance and the fire trucks next door. In closing, I would like to remind everybody that North Guilford calls cover a long way. We go all the way to the North Branford line, we go to the Durham line, we go to the North Madison line. This is a lot of territory, considering you have 2 schools with approximately 700 people in them during the school year, over 220 condos at the north end of the lake, a public beach that gets so packed during the summer that many times it's filled to capacity, and a state boat ramp that fishermen use from all over the state to access Lake Quantipoc and West Lake and Clear Lake. Aside from that, I'd like to just give you a personal example that impacts me. Okay. Just 30 seconds more. On June 2nd, 2015, I left my home to present a Guilford Volunteer Fire Department scholarship at the high school. As I turned onto Long Hill Road, a call came in for a fall at my home. I had 2 choices: race back home and not present the award, or race to the high school and hand off the award to another person. I raced to the high school, handed it off to Captain Doug McGee in the parking lot, and then raced with only lights, no sirens, or extra lights like an ambulance and a fire engine. I raced back up Long Hill, west on Route 80, north on 77 to Lake Quantipoc, around the backside of the lake. I arrived back at my house 2 to 3 minutes before the paid career guys arrived at my house. Unfortunately, 55 hours later, my husband succumbed. I urge you, as the Selectmen and Fire Commissioners, to give full support for the SAFER grant. Every man, every woman, and child deserves the same emergency and fire services as downtown. We are all residents of the same town. It's not like you have 2 separate towns. Branford, North Branford, Madison, North Madison. It's not Guilford, North Guilford. We're all one town. Thank you.
My name is Cynthia Damer. I live on Great Hill Road in North Guilford. I'm here today to express my support for the acceptance of the SAFER grant awarded to Guilford to improve public safety by hiring additional EMT and fire personnel to be housed in North Guilford. For some time, the residents of North Guilford have been at a disadvantage due to our distance from police and fire headquarters located near I-95. We have a wonderful North Guilford firehouse and many dedicated volunteers. But over the 41 years I have lived on Great Hill Road, the number of volunteer EMTs and firefighters has been reduced due to aging and changes in our society. This has resulted in an average emergency response time of 12 minutes for calls north of Route 80. A member of our church, the North Guilford Congregational Church, had a heart attack on Sunday morning 2 years ago, and help did not arrive for 14 minutes. That is far too long. If the ambulance had come from our own North Guilford Firehouse, the response time would have been about 5 minutes. North Guilford residents are in a more rural area than downtown, and the homes are farther apart. We have hundreds of school children at Melissa Jones every day, plus the North Guilford Nursery School, and 2 very active churches. Last Thursday night, for example, it's not just Sunday mornings. We had 2 committee meetings, choir rehearsal, and AA meeting downstairs. AA meets at our church a couple nights a week. It meets at St. John's Episcopal Church. Boy Scouts. We have a very, very active community up in North Guilford. There are a large number of townspeople that use Lake Quanapog, especially for swimming during the summer, for fishing year-round. And crew teams from Choate and Guilford High School use the lake, this wonderful resource. If an accident should happen on that lake, we need a faster response time. I strongly urge the board to accept this grant and fully staff North Guilford. This is about saving lives. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. This is about saving lives for the citizens in North Guilford. We pay our fair share of taxes, and we deserve equal town services. Thank you.
Heidi Smith, 885 Lake Drive. This issue became very close to me when, about a month ago, my neighbor thought he was having a heart attack, and I waited with him because his wife wasn't home for almost 20 minutes. And I said afterwards, I don't know what would have happened if I'm not skilled to do that. These guys are stretched too thin. There needs to be somebody north to support us. I look at this grant as a gift of opportunity, an opportunity to staff it, to get it right, and phase in to get in 8 people that are staffed up north. Because somebody having a real heart attack could be dead, because we can't get there. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. My name's Jenny Dean. I live at 909 Beaverhead Road. I am here this morning on behalf of many young and working families who are getting school children off and in commutes who couldn't be here as well. I am asking you to support the SAFER grant that would allow for life-saving staffing of EMT personnel in the area of Guilford that represents 30% of your tax-paying residents. Regardless of the obstacles in implementing this grant within the 30 days it calls upon, I call upon the Board of Selectmen to organize and prioritize this plan, just as you would, no doubt, find a way to spend federal dollars following a surprise hurricane or a snow blizzard. My husband and my 2 young children and I live 18 minutes from this downtown fire station. Let this statement be fair and proper warning that if one of my family dies or is irrevocably injured due to a delay in emergency services, I will hold this township responsible and will take all legal actions to remedy our suffering. Thank you for your time. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Carol Usher. I live at 2864 Long Hill Road, which is north of Route 80. And I have to put on my glasses, sorry. I was surprised when I learned only recently that we in North Guilford don't have the full-time protections that we've had in the past for fire and medical emergencies. The attention my family has received over 60 years from the North Guilford Fire Department since 1958 has been without fault. Some of my personal and professional history while living and working in Guilford
may illustrate why I feel the FEMA grant funds to provide full protection to the north of town are extremely important. So as new homeowners in North Guilford in 1958, my husband and I purchased the former Oliver Scranton farmhouse within sight of the firehouse that was just around the corner and across the meadow. This was just south of Lake Quanapug on Route 77. The following year, in 1959, I gave birth to a severely brain-damaged infant who developed grand mal seizures soon after birth. And whenever her breathing was interrupted by one of those seizures, the North Guilford Fire Department responded quickly to my calls to revive her. This was frequently. My husband worked out of town, and I did not drive. So my North Guilford neighbors, who were our volunteer firemen, offered much comfort and security during those very stressful years prior to my daughter's death when she was 2.5 years old. Now, not long after that, excuse me, in 1962, still living within view of the fire department, I had a postpartum hemorrhage with a massive loss of blood. Again, the fire department responded quickly in time for the ambulance to get me to Yale New Haven Hospital for 2 life-saving blood transfusions. And I owe my life to the fire department and the ambulance drivers, according to my doctor. And there was no Yale New Haven at Goose Lane in those days. And I want to add that in the mid-70s, 1970s, the years go by, I was a town employee working with the Guilford Visiting Nurse Association. And my assignment was primarily in North Guilford because I'm a nurse and I have seen firsthand the value of prompt response when it comes to life-saving. Throughout the following years until my husband's death in 2007, there were several other occasions that called for prompt emergency intervention in my home. The ambulance was there once for a heart attack, excuse me, and later a stroke. Although we had since moved to 2864 Long Hill Road, the firehouse is still nearby north of Route 80. The availability of full police, fire, and medical emergency service will give me and my neighbors peace of mind. Now that I am really old and living alone, I know I'm at risk and vulnerable, as are many of my neighbors. Also, I have been paying increasing property taxes since 1958, and they have become burdensome, and I am entitled to the full benefits offered by those taxes. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Buster Scranton, 3380 Durham Road, North Guilford. And first I'd like to correct a couple of misconceptions. We don't cover just the area of town north of Route 80. We extend below Route 80 quite a bit. Plus we do mutual aid calls and come downtown as needed. So it's not just a matter of serving North Guilford. Also, it seems to have become known that about 30% of the emergency calls are up there. That is not correct. It's about 10 or 12%. But if you're one of those 10 or 12% who need emergency services, you would like it to show up in a timely fashion. And lastly, I'd like to say that I can just about guarantee that since I am down here right now, if there was a call in North Guilford right now, there would be nobody from North Guilford responding to it. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to address the board in public forum? I just want to add, the board has received in addition to what we heard, 46 letters of support for the FEMA grant and one letter in opposition. So, in addition to what you heard today. Okay, if we can close public forum, move on to item 6. Assistant Fire Chief of Operations, Michael Scho, is going to make a presentation on the FEMA grant. Chief, the floor is yours.
Chief.
Thank you.
Morning. Okay. Tough act to follow, public forum. All right, I wanted to take the time in this opportunity to speak about the grant, some facts and information about it. We'll start by kind of how we got here, the application process, and the grant itself is not new to us. We were SAFER grant recipients in 2008. We hired the last 8 firefighters in 2008 from that grant. The performance period and a little bit of the grant has changed itself over time. The current grant and the past grant are, the goal of the SAFER grant is to assist local fire departments with staffing and deployment capabilities in order to respond to emergencies and assure that communities have adequate protection from fire and fire-related hazards. So that's the goal of the SAFER grant. It's a FEMA grant program. We continue for the last couple of years to apply for this grant to look to transition and look at our weaknesses throughout the town. North Guilford, through response times, has continued to increase over time. So this particular, in the last 2 years, we've focused on staffing the North Guilford area for a greater level of care and services. The study itself, the MMA study, which was done in 2004, was done for the town and looked at staffing, looked at our needs. It recommended staffing needs based on NFPA 1710. That's the measurement tools that we use to determine our effectiveness of the response throughout town. It recommended staffing the North Guilford station, and it also recommended monthly and annual reviews of the effectiveness of response. So every month at the commission meeting with Board of Fire Commission, we report our monthly statistics of NFPA 1710 compliance. That's kind of our scorecard of how we're doing to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. The timeline for this grant. We're on a pretty stringent timeline. As everyone knows, we didn't plan on getting the award. We never plan on it, but in the event that we do get an award, it's our job to present it in front of the Board of Selectmen, Board of Fire Commission. The award was granted to us by the federal government on September 22nd. From the time of the award to the time we have to accept or decline, we have till October 22nd. So a little less than a week. If we accept the grant, our performance period begins. The performance period for this grant is 36 months of federal support. We have 180 days, so a 6-month window to hire these 8 firefighters. Once the 8 firefighters are hired, they'll be trained and working. They all have to be working by April 22nd of 2018. And then this grant will go for that 3-year period to 4/22/21, where the performance period will end. The federal money, the way the money works from the government is they will cover 75% of the annual cost for salary and benefits at the time of application. So from the time we applied to the grant, they'll cover 75% of that salary and benefits for the first 2 years. The last year it phases out to 35%, and the town has to pay the difference of the 65% over that time. So when we applied for the money, the actual statistics on the money itself, this is the data from when the time of application. The first 12-month period, the federal share is $632,646. The second 12-month period is $632,646, and the last 12-month period is $295,234. A total of $1.5 million over 3 years, really 4 fiscal years. So we overlaid that over our fiscal year budget and projected it out for 5 years so we could look at the impact of how this would look down the road for the 5 years. The first, really this year's 2017-18 budget, we only have 11 weeks left, so we have to have them hired by April 22nd. That'll leave us 11 pay weeks out of that time of this year's budget, which comes up to a total of 44,609. And you can see that gray line, the transition of the applicant share, which is the town of Guilford share, over the 5 years. With 52 weeks at second year, so next year's fiscal budget 18-19, we have 52 weeks at 75%. The 19-20 budget phases out to 41 weeks and then 11 weeks at 35. We also, in these calculations, we also accounted for 3% wage increase and 5% benefit increases if those were the over time that what it would be. So to be conservative and say worst case scenario or, you know, middle of the road numbers, we wanted to show those numbers over a period of time. The other big piece to this year, because we weren't planning on the lower left corner, because we weren't planning on getting the grant, which we ended up getting, we have to account for gear, uniforms, equipment, and training. So we came up with a total cost of $105,672 for this year's fiscal budget that we would need to get started. Questions?
So at the end of the 3-year period, like the last grant, we had to retain the firemen for a period of time. What's the time frame this time?
Last time the grant was a five-year performance period, and it phased in over 5 years. And the 5th year, we were 100%, just like the 5th year for this, we were 100% had to maintain in the last year. During the 36 months, we have to maintain the 8 firefighters for just the performance period of 36 months, and then evaluate at year 5. So there's no requirement. You mean there's no requirement that 4th year in this grant to keep them, correct?
Okay. And because I think there's no doubt that we need personnel in North Guilford, particularly ambulance situation. But there's been a lot of, and I've talked to some commissioners about whether or not we actually need the full 8, but the grant requires that we have to hire 8, correct?
Correct, that's what we applied for, and that's based on staffing. Because we're hiring 8, we're actually only staffing 2 more per shift, and those 2 would be at the North Guilford Firehouse. So it would be 2 more on shift to take the ambulance, take the fire truck, depending on what the emergency is.
So what happens if somebody, because we're gonna be staffing 1 ambulance per shift up there, correct? Right, is that how it's gonna work with the 2?
Just like we have 1 ambulance downtown staff, and the goal of North Guilford is if it's an emergency, medical emergency, we're taking the ambulance. The operational situation stuff has not fully been worked out, but yes, the goal is the medical response would be
there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And that would also include a firefighter EMT and a firefighter paramedic.
So if they're out on a call and somebody else in North Guilford needs something, where does that personnel then come from?
So it's still going to come from downtown, meaning if once that first ambulance goes out, 2 people just touches the, you know, again, we still have minimal staff all around. So it's the same thing, your downtown crews are still going to be coming to North Guilford.
Mike, when we own the 8 additional, do we still need 8 down here?
Do we still need 8 down here?
Yeah, in 1 shift.
Per shift?
Yeah.
I would say that that's something that we're going to have to continually evaluate over time, meaning just like we do at the current commission meetings, as we move forward at year 2 and year 3, we're just have to continually measure the effectiveness. Can we look at some operational things and based on calls and statistics? Where I think we're open to ideas of looking at resource coordination and deployment. I know that the big thing about this is once we ask for the 10 or the 8 from the government and increase staffing to 10 during the performance period, we have to maintain the 10.
Understood.
But we're always going to look at ways to better efficiently use resources and people.
Okay. So possibly you could keep 9 all total.
Keep 9 if that's what the town wants and that's the data that makes sense, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
So I understand that you're only gonna keep 2 people in North Guilford.
Staff 2 per shift.
Staff 2 per shift.
Correct.
And does the facility up there accommodate that without any additional cost or
Absolutely.
material cost?
That's the fortunate part of this situation, because we are geographically so big, 17 miles, 47 square miles, that's one of our hardships in this town. But there's already infrastructure, there's already fire trucks, and we sat down and met with the North Guilford companies, both Company 4 and Company 5, and they absolutely support the decision, and Company 5 is very limited. They already have, again, all the amenities are there.
What is the average response time from headquarters now?
The average response time to District 2, the way we measure it, is 12 minutes. And that's 12 minutes is covers both sides.
Right.
So, anybody north of Lake Quanapog, it's going to take longer. And there's parts of Guilford if you have to actually go into Durham to get to.
I'm aware of that.
And into North Branford. So there's some challenges.
So we can conceivably cut that in half, I assume.
That's what we're looking to do. Yeah, that radius from that firehouse in North Guilford to knock that 12-minute response time down to. The national average and recommendations are having a paramedic on scene in less than 8 minutes. So that's our goal, is to get as many people as we can in less than 8 minutes to get a paramedic on scene, especially at emergency scenes with a heart attack, difficulty breathing, and things like that.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mike, North Guilford is fairly obviously the greatest need at this point in time. But are the 8 additional employees, they're not required to be in North Guilford? We can use them, to Cindy's point, when that ambulance goes out and we need more.
Yes. As the chief has always said, we can only manage one call at a time. So if our resources need to be at a structure fire in the middle of town, we're going to deploy all 10 resources or all 10 personnel the best we can.
Some of them will probably be coming from this department.
Absolutely, it goes both ways too. We still are not going to send trucks. If we need to send trucks north for like we always have, it's going to be that combination of just 2 stations. Really, it's going to significantly cut the response time down to those primary emergencies. And even on the fire side, the ability to get a hand line in place in a short period of time. There's a bunch of fires up there. If we're able to get there quicker and hold something in place while the cavalry comes from downtown, makes a big impact on.
Well, that's the point I was trying to get to, that when you're talking 8 new employees, it's not keyed necessarily to one area of the town. It's a benefit to the entire town.
It's a benefit to the entire town, absolutely.
And I will say, having the scanner in my office, many people I'm sure around sitting in the ordinance have scanners. It's not unusual to get more than 1 call at a time.
It's very common, simultaneous calls.
Have you done an analysis on what, if anything, it'll do to the replacement salary account by hiring the additional personnel? Will we receive the benefit equal to what we're spending for the first year, the 105?
So our goal is to reduce that replacement salary account. Over time, it's going to take us a good 4 to 6 weeks to get those people, get the firefighters trained. So that's going to limit our ability to use those people to offset some of the costs this year. Down the road is into the next fiscal year, the more we can offset the salary account, although there'll be some, those 8 new firefighters will also be entitled to vacation 6 months after being hired. So hopefully there'll be a reduction. That's the goal. We're going to start to offset the second ambulance runs now using the ambulance in North Guilford, meaning that ambulance is going to start to absorb, or those crews are starting to absorb that replacement salary account.
But you haven't specifically done an analysis to see what projected costs?
We did 3 months. So last year we did 3 months. We had 161 calls, approximately $44,000, and that's the cost of the salary. But those firefighters aren't going to be working, unless we're looking at other opportunities. If, for instance, if we hire volunteers, if some of our firefighters from the volunteer side take the test, which they have, we'll be able to possibly utilize some of them to offset some of that replacement salary account.
Now, these 8 won't be hired until sometime in April, correct?
Correct.
Now, they were not accounted for in a very, very tight budget.
Correct.
So, a twofold question, a comment and then a question. Am I correct in saying, the HR director's back there, here we go, hey Mitch, is that they will not be eligible for any medical benefits until the next fiscal year? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Mitch, is that correct?
That's correct. Mike and I had a discussion about that. That's correct.
Okay, so we don't have to,
Any employees, any full-time employees that are hired in the month of April will not be eligible for their medical benefits or life insurance benefits until July. So it'll be the next fiscal year.
We don't have to cover that in this fiscal year?
Correct.
Okay. So that just brings into mind the salary. Okay. Thank you, Mitch.
Yep.
But if all these people have to be on site, whatever the date was, the 22nd of April, they aren't going to start the 21st. I mean, you're going to start hiring them between now and then, presumably.
Yeah, the hiring process itself, that's the next challenge. It's 180 days to hire
Right.
8 people, and we're looking for 8 EMTs, 8 paramedic, or 4 EMTs, 4 paramedics. So we're gonna have some challenges there too.
It's not going to be clean, they all start the day before. or
We're
the day
hoping,
of.
we're hoping we can, have
Well, even if you bring them on April 1st, or April 4th, excuse
Well,
me.
April 22nd, we have to bring them on,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You
right.
said
Yeah.
Yeah,
we have to.
we
get
have
the
to.
April
That's the
22nd.
drop dead date by the
People
government that we
available
have to
in the
have
same
the
month,
staffing.
likely.
Okay. I mean, I'm all in favor of this, don't get me wrong, I'm just trying to work out the numbers. Have you looked at your budgets and decide how you're gonna make up the 8 salaries?
You mean the 106,
Yeah,
John?
yeah.
I think,
Commissioner, yeah?
yes.
That's my next question.
Ken Wilson, Chairman, Board of Fire Commissioners. In the letter that I presented to you, we stated that we do not, in our present fiscal budget, have the additional funds necessary to cover the hiring or the salaries, the benefits, the gear, and the equipment. So we would be looking to the town to support us in this initiative. And as you know, aside from this, for the last 4 to 5 years in my budget presentations to the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, is that we have continually looked internally and externally for opportunities to support this initiative to man North Guilford Fire Station. Unfortunately, not knowing that we were going to get the grant, we did not fund additional funds in this year's budget. So we do not have that money to do that. Also, in addition, over the last 2 to 3 years, we've been cut in our annual budget in the fire service. So there was nowhere that we can go to help offset any of that $105,000.
However, in the current budget, we did increase your replacement.
This year you
budget,
did,
yeah.
to get us to where we need to be.
Right, okay. Good.
Okay. Right, and also just for public record, because I like you, Joe, 46, I've gotten a lot of emails, texts, phone calls. I want to thank the community and everybody for their support of the FEMA grant. But you know, the Board of Fire Commissioners and the Fire Department continually looks at opportunities internally and externally, whether it be through our existing funding or whether it be through the grants. And we're very fortunate as a community to be able to be offered the FEMA Safer Grant for the second time. It doesn't happen all the time. The fact that it came when it did, it's unfortunate or whatever. You know, there's a lot of things going on. But we are seen as a very proactive fire service, fire department, public safety, town in general. And I think the other thing that's important is the Board of Fire Commissioners has identified we have a need. This isn't a wish list. This isn't a must. This is a need. We have a need to have additional fire staff or fire personnel on staff to cover the entire town of Guilford, not just downtown, but North Guilford as well, which is
Mike, and I wish some of this had come out earlier, I did my calculations looking at the fire department budget, and I am not opposed to coverage in North Guilford. I just want to get the facts on the table. It appears to me that 8 firefighters in this town cost $1.05 million a year. And I did that by taking salaries, existing salaries for existing staff, a percentage of overtime per person, a percentage of stipends per person, a percentage of replacement per person, adding in medical benefits and retirement benefits. And I believe it's 6%, but I didn't have that number in front of me. And therefore, I came up with a number of $1.05 million. So that's different from the number that you've presented, but I would like to get that on the table. On the other hand, and I understand you're in a shortage of time, you've implied that there could be a reduction in overtime and replacement. do you have any sense, I mean, if there are 4 people added per shift, 2 up there and 2 here, or would it be 1 here and 1 rotating to fill? I mean, does that significantly reduce the replacement and overtime? My second question related to that, and I know at our last discussion over the ambulance, we were talking about the fact that if there are 2 ambulance calls, you call in outside staff to staff, I guess here. I don't know where physically they are. Are they here? If we have a 3rd ambulance team, does that mean we are very unlikely to call in an outside staff, an outside staffing situation? And I don't recall what that number is. I don't know if it's once a month, once a year, or whatever. But can you give us some sense of what those savings might be? Because I think, as I see this, when it's all over, we're looking at $1 million a year additional cost.
Yeah, over 5 years, at the end of 5 years, as once we absorb 100% of
If
approximately.
that level of, if that level of.
The grants-
Grant's 3 years.
3
The
years.
4th year would be,
4th year, it phases out over
Yeah.
time. So the full impact is on year 5 of the
Right.
fiscal year.
okay.
But yeah, so to give you, for instance, right now our primary ambulance comes out of headquarters. When a second ambulance call comes in, which is more and more common today, we use it's called Medic 3, our second ambulance out, which is down at Washington Engine. That is staffed with part-time call-in crews, so that are getting 3 hours of time and a half per call. So to offset that, that is significant now that second ambulance calls continue to rise, and even third ambulance calls continue to rise. So very common, we have multiple calls at the same time. So adding an additional 2 people to the staff, however, we're gonna increase, so where we're actually staffing full-time personnel as opposed to paying part-time personnel time and a half, that's a lot of the replacement cost. So we're gonna actually be able to offset that cost by having the additional staffing in place instead of having to rely on people to come in from home or from somewhere else. We're actually staffing that, and the goal is to reduce that piece of it.
Is that tens of thousands, 100,000?
Well, like I said,
that's unfair, because
No,
I know you
actually,
just got this
you asked that
process.
before. In 3 months, in a 3-month study, we did 161 calls last year, because we were looking even in this year's fiscal budget, how can we look at ways of, if we get somebody on board in that 3-month window, how can we try and reduce the cost of those things? And that's absolutely what we're targeting, and that was $44,000 just in that 3-month period that we looked at to offset costs. So if we have people in place that we're not gonna have to pay time and a half, 3 hours for people to come in from home, and also the delay of service, where we have that personnel on staff. Does that answer the question?
Mostly, yes.
Okay.
All right, I'm in complete favor of this, and, but I want to be clear with everybody, Gary's right. This could have had money, but it's money well spent, don't get me wrong. The other point bringing up is that these 8 people are not going to be part of our pension. They all go into the 401A. So it's not a one-for-one addition. The pension plan is much more expensive than the 401A. So there's a factor there. I don't know if you figured that in, Gary. Did you do it on the
I did.
401?
I figured in 6%.
On the 401?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Although, Joe, I would point out that, the disadvantage of the 401 is you pay it every year, whether the market's up, down, sideways, or whatever. I mean, this year, our pension plan has done terrifically, but.
It also depends on how much the employee contributes to.
Right,
Okay,
right.
it's 1-for-1. They don't have to contribute the 6. Okay. The other thing is that you're going to increase your replacement cost because you have more to replace. So, but like I said, it's money well spent. And living on the border of North Guilford, I know from experience how long it takes to get an ambulance up there. So I have to congratulate the Assistant Chief for getting the grant. It was a lot of work, and it took a lot of effort to get this grant. And it's one way to start to get more protection for the people of North Guilford. But I'm a numbers guy, so I look into the numbers, okay? It's get that on the table. So I've gone over the numbers with the assistant chief, met with the chief, with the finance director, and also with the commission chairman. I've got nothing more to say but to move ahead with this. Is there anybody else that wants us to say anything? Gary?
I just have a couple more questions.
Sure, go ahead.
And quite honestly, I'm not worried about the 105 or the 130, whatever that number is. We have a contingency. The governor's going to do much worse to us than your 130, so I'm not...
He's trying.
He's trying. But just as long as we have a public forum, I've heard the number of 12 minutes for a response time in North Guilford. What would be our response time, say, to the Gables or Sachem's Head?
It's a great question. There's actually plenty of outlying areas, for instance, the Gables, Sachem's Head, East Bear House Hill, Podunk, areas of Podunk that are just outside the 9 minutes. So the issues in those areas is we don't have infrastructure and vehicles in those areas. And they're on the fringe of that 8 to 9 minute response where we have a condensed area, infrastructure, buildings, trucks, and all we need to do is put the people there. That will have a great impact on our overall response.
I've driven. I can get to the North Guilford Fire Department from here at about the same time that I can get to my house from here with 4 turns and whatever. Going to North Guilford's a straight shot with a siren and lights. My guess is it's actually less time than to my house, but I'm not advocating that you put them in my garage. But I just want to get the facts out that there are other areas in town
Absolutely.
That have this same kind of delay, or the same kind of response issue, so that we're not, this isn't a discrimination against North Guilford that it doesn't work this way. It's a physical issue.
You better not be speeding.
What?
You better not be speeding.
I was doing the speed limit. That's why it was approximately the same. But
Where's car 7 when we need it?
I know. Again, I think the work, the potential savings, and for the replacement and some of the other costs do change the numbers somewhat. I hope they change the numbers somewhat. I think, this budget, like any other budget, has a tendency to expand and keep expanding and not look for savings. And also the fact that the fire station in North Guilford is currently equipped is something that I wasn't aware of prior to your presentation. So again, as long as everybody understands that this is $1 million, that we are, if we approve this, we're committing to $1 million budget increase, whether it's paid for by SAFER or by taxpayers. That's really the number that we're looking at. Well, whether it's paid for by taxpayers or SAFER, it's $1 million a year
Potentially. I have a couple
of expense that's going on our budget, no matter who it's paid by.
Gary, I want to, just one comment. This department, from the commission down to the administration, every single year goes through its budget, through every line item, account, everything. We do the best that we can to minimize the impact that we have on the town of Guilford and the taxpayers that pay that tab, if you will. So I take a little exception when I hear you make those comments about us not looking for.
No, I didn't say you're not looking for it. We go through this every year at budget time, and we get to question you, and we do all that, and we make a decision. So there's no criticism of the budget process or what you're doing. I just wanted everybody to understand that we're talking about $1 million, and I understand the shortness of this process means that not all the numbers are available, but I just want everybody to have a clear view of what this is. What this has the potential to cost the town.
And we realize that. We, at our last Board of Fire Commissioners meeting, went through this, and we vetted this entire application. We asked more questions than what has been discussed today of the Assistant Chief and the Chief. And right down to, just as you talked about, logistics, response times, financial, et cetera, et cetera. And we, at the end, made the decision that this is the right time, or the right, I want to say the right time, but a need for Guilford. And on top of that, not only do we believe it's the need, but the federal government believes, based on our application, that we have a need and they're willing to support us. So I just want to end with that piece.
I just had a couple. This is public forum, so I think it'd be a good opportunity. I just had a couple questions and I want to make a comment. So, how often do we use, first responders coming from Durham and North Branford when we're taxed? Because I think the increase, what I've heard from all the letters and knowing this personally, the increase is really the ambulance issue. That's really the need, and that's going to grow. So how does that work? So maybe explain to the people how that.
The question is, are you asking how often do we use mutual
Yeah, like
aid?
Durham, North Branford, Madison. I mean, how? Yeah.
Predominantly, we use Branford and Madison because of the centralized calls, and we have a mutual aid agreement with them, and they have a mutual aid agreement with us. At any one town, if they're saturated with EMS calls, fires, that they can call the surrounding towns, and we're going to support them. So that when it comes to EMS, I don't know the exact number, but it's not. What's a safe number? 15 to 20 times a month throughout there.
So when they come though, they're coming from.
You may, if all of our ambulance service is taxed, or we have a large motor vehicle accident on the highway, we're going to call Madison, Branford, Madison to all come help us. So, and the same thing with them when they're taxed, their system's taxed with stuff like that.
Right, but if you had like 5 ambulance calls, like.
And that happens.
You have to, right.
If we can support that with in-house, because we generate revenue from billing, we always try and use our ambulances first. We call out for that second crew, the third crew, the fourth crew. And if we can staff that with the part-time staff that we have, we prefer to use our ambulances first, meaning that we're going to support it from within. But if we call out for a crew and there's no response, or nobody calling into the dispatch center to say, hey, I'm available, I'm coming for the ambulance, within 3 minutes or approximately, we're starting another ambulance from another town.
So how many crews do we have, potentially? I mean, they may not all be available, but how many crews would
So
we
we
have?
only staff one crew.
Right.
24/7.
Part-time.
So we staff one ambulance. But the other piece is everybody that's currently here, the other 6 that are currently here are also paramedics and EMTs. There's a lot of times that if we can't get a paramedic for the second ambulance, our paramedic will come off of our engine and go on the ambulance in. And it's all based on the number of calls or simultaneous calls and things like that.
Okay. But you're still finding that there's an additional need to have the full-time because of not having the resources available in a timely manner.
Right. It's the resources are limited for the part-time call-ins.
What is there the opportunity? Somebody asked me this too. The private ambulance services, has that been pretty much? I know a lot of companies have gone out of business, so that's not even.
In regards to what?
To use for emergency personnel. Like before, it used to be the private ambulance services, but that's not even available anymore.
We use the same thing. Branford, Madison. We use the staffed ambulances that are town ambulances.
All right. I just, I'm in supportive of this, even though it's a difficult thing to absorb, and I appreciate Gary's comments financially. But this is kind of what I've been saying for a number of years, that these are the type of services that we should be looking to support. And, and I charge the new administration to find the savings elsewhere, which we can, and I've pointed out over the number of years, so that we can support this program. And in speaking to a couple of commissioners, whether or not, and you've alluded to some of that we may or may not need specifically 8, and we have to look at the resources, and maybe some of that can be absorbed through some retirements or whatever over the period of time, so it's not officially 8. But I still think we have to look at all of that and as we move forward. What we do know in Connecticut is that we have a declining population overall, and studies have shown this specifically in Guilford. We're looking at 1,000 declining population over the next 20, 25 years. However, what we are seeing is the aging population with those remaining. And that's where the ambulance services and emergency personnel is definitely going to, the need, and I'm saying this, and studies have shown this, that there's going to be an increased need in those types of services. So where you may have a decrease in other areas because of a declining population, those are the areas where we're going to need additional service. So to me, this is a no-brainer from a service perspective. And I've talked to a number of the firemen, both volunteers and full-time, and the need is absolutely there. I just think we have to find the savings elsewhere as we move forward, and that's not, it's partly your department's responsibility, but also the people sitting in these chairs, so.
I'll add one more thing to that, and Guilford is unique because it's the 5th largest town geographically, and that's our problem too, is that it's 17 miles from the coast to the Durham line, and that's a lot to cover. 47 square miles. Yeah, almost 48, right, 48 square miles. And that's why we're so unique, and we have that much land and that much territory, yeah, it costs a lot. And you have to protect people. And I've been saying this since I took office almost 8 years ago. The prime duty of the first selectman and board of selectmen is the safety and the protection of its people. So without any further discussion, I'd like to call for a vote. Somebody would make a motion then?
I'll make a motion that we accept the grant. Is that exactly how accept the safer grant received by the fire department?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to
Charles?
make a comment to Gary's point. I think we've all seen and, heard from many people from not only North Guilford, but around the community about the need. And it's a grant like this that addresses the need. It gives us the opportunity to Cindy's point, to assess after, we make this move and staff North Guilford, if that's the direction, or find where the savings are going to be. To Cindy's point, this is what gives us the opportunity. This is the value of the grant. We have a need and we're addressing it. And I have to support it.
Any further discussion? Call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Thank you. Chief, good work. Again, I want to thank everybody for attendance and for all their letters. Thank you very much.
I just have a question. How many folks back there are part of the volunteer services? We have a number of guys. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on with the meeting. We have still a long agenda. 7.1, Fire Chief.
Thank you for the support.
Good morning, Chief.
Hold it for a minute, Joe. Let them clear. They don't want to hear
Found this
about
in some of my father's stuff.
They don't want to hear about
Give you a smile.
I don't want to hear about those.
What? It was just, I brought through boxes of stuff for my father and mother. Pardon me? I'm trying to get this through. Okay, Chief, roll set. 7.1, consider to take possible action on the purchase of fire hose from Shipman's Fire Equipment. You're on.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chief.
Thank you for the support.
You're welcome.
And the
Anytime.
Assistant Chief did a great job.
He did.
I'm here before the board to have you approve the purchase of 3,000 feet of 4-inch supply hose from Shipman Fire Equipment. It's not the lowest bid, but the lowest quote. It is the hose that we've been presently using. It gives us the best service life. We have hose that is like 25 years old. It has the best warranty, and it has the best service pressure use. So I'm asking for the board to approve it from Shipman's Fire Equipment.
what kind of service pressure use mean.
In other words, we can put a higher pressure through the line. So
Okay.
most hoses rated for 220, this one gets rated for 250. For the longer stretches down long driveways, we need the added pressure.
Okay, so the Firematic has a
Lower operating pressure.
No, for the purposes of discussion, I'll move that we accept the recommendation of the chief for additional fire hose or as needed for what, a total of $15,000? $150.
Motion's made. Is there a second?
I'll second, but I have a question. So why can't we use the lowest bid? What's, just so I understand, is it different hose?
It's not the same quality hose.
like an actual different.
Right.
So when they do a bid, wouldn't we be asking for the same?
Well, the
equipment?
problem, we go through this with the purchasing also, is certain vendors only allowed to sell certain hose.
Right.
It's sole source vending.
So they can bid, even though we don't want to.
Well, we go out and try to get 3 quotes for the same hose vendor, but you only can get one from one manufacturer.
Okay.
You know what
All
I'm
right,
saying?
got it.
So I can't get price for snap
For
tight.
his shipments,
Right.
whatever, okay.
Okay, they're the only sole source vendor of the
Got it,
equipment.
okay.
So I try to get comparable bidding or quotes.
Any further discussion? Called question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you again for the support.
You're welcome.
You wanted to table the finance?
Yes, we want to table
Move
finance.
to be table to another meeting or next month, Joe? What are you going to
Next meeting.
do? Next meeting.
All in favor? Aye. Aye, okay. I just want to add the finance director had to attend the funeral, and that's why we're not available. Board of Ed, Director of Operations, Cliff Curtin, number 9. Cliff, Brian. Okay.
Chief, it's too cold in here.
What keeps us awake? Consider and take possible action to contract with B&L companies for the on-call architect list for design, engineering, and replacement electrical service for Baldwin Middle School. Good morning, Cliff.
Good morning. Thanks for having me this morning.
Okay.
So we did a recent survey for the electrical equipment at actually 3 schools, Baldwin, Melissa Jones, and Cox. And in this case, we're specifically looking at Baldwin. The equipment is up to its useful past life cycle, so therefore we're starting to have issues getting replacement parts like breakers and things of that nature. So we're looking at replacing the distribution and main switchgear for the building. So in order to do that, we need to do a full design and some calculations to ensure we have the proper size system for the building, knowing in the future that we will be replacing some of the HVAC equipment because that's aging as well. We're kind of doing this in conjunction. So we're looking at having you approve today under the on-call architect proposal for BL companies for the design of the electrical system at Baldwin Middle School for $20,400.
I would move the question.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
My only question
Gary?
is in this process, do our energy-saving consultants come into play to look at the design and the acquisition of equipment for both energy savings as well as?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Like right up the street, so.
Yeah, so, one of the primary reasons we're doing this is because we know we potentially have a large energy-saving project coming down the pike. So BL Companies has been involved with Johnson Controls to discuss the upcoming measures so that we design to the appropriate size for the proposed energy savings. Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Okay. 9.2, discuss and take possible action to contract with B&L companies for the on-call architect/engineer list for design and engineering replacement electrical service for Cox Elementary School.
So this is the same thing,
So
right?
moved.
So I'll move, yeah,
Absolutely.
second.
All in favor? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, you're a volunteer fireman, so you
Yes.
wanted to be in that. I didn't.
Go back up north. So
There you go.
This is a
Okay, we have 2 selectmen that have appointments, so I will entertain a motion to move the agenda, item 16, to the next item, to go into executive session on a employment contract.
So moved.
Is that okay?
fine with me.
Okay, motion's made. Second, all in favor? Aye. Aye. And I'm going to invite the HR director. We'll come back for a vote.
Joe, the only, we can handle Jim in 30 seconds.
Jim can wait 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay, so this is a short one.
This is a short one. We'll come back, okay. About 5-10 minutes, okay?
Morning.
Good morning, Mitch. Trace, don't go anyplace. need a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I need a motion to act on the employment contract.
I would move that we favorably act on the employment contract as presented.
Second.
And as I said, I'm opposed to this, but I don't think we should be tying the hands of the new person. This board should tie the hands of the new board, and it should be up to them to determine how they want to go and what direction with legal, so.
Okay, this is just an extension and not a full 3-year contract. It's only an extension of 1 year, so that's my comment to that. Any other discussion? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, that's 4 in favor, 1 in opposition. Okay. Okay, Jim, you're next. 10. Thank you all. Town Engineer Jim Portley, consider and take possible action on the rental of a tub grinder for the bush and leaf disposal site. Jim, thank you for
Good afternoon.
your understanding on that. Okay, Jim, you're up.
Yes, as you all know, once a year, we grind the brush that's accumulated at the Sullivan brush and leaf disposal area. The last 3 years, we've entered into agreement with the Durham Middlefield people. They've been giving us great service. It's been at a reduced price from what we used to pay when we were out using the tub grinder from Scara out east. So I would recommend that the Board of Selectmen approve use of the tub grinder from Durham Middlefield transfer station. Again, this year, $15,000. They won't charge us moving fees or anything else. It's pretty straightforward.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Call question, all in favor?
Aye.
Jim, 10.2, discuss and take possible action on disposal of inoperable or not road-worthy vehicles. Inoperable.
Some of these old vehicles starting to accumulate, and they going into the winter. We don't need a bunch of old junk laid around, covered with snow, getting in the way of operations. So I would ask the Board of Selectmen to authorize us to get rid of these vehicles. None of them are something you wouldn't put on the road. They go all over the place. So rather than try to put them out to auction, there isn't anything of their value. Our recommendation would get rid of them as junk.
Yeah, but why can't we sell them as scrap?
We are. That's exactly what the idea is, scrap value.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll move that.
Yeah, but I don't want to delay us. In the back of the transfer station is this great big truck behind the metal truck.
We've tried to get rid of that several times. We have to get around dragging it out. Yeah, no, it's an old white. Somebody told us.
Motion was made, is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Carries, thank you.
Good riddance.
Jim, want to hang around for a second? Okay. Request for the use of town property.
I would move that we approve the 2 signs and the use as presented in the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you. Correspondence, I think we went through most of our correspondence at the beginning of the meeting, so I have none. Old business, anybody? Nope. New business, anybody? Nope. Public forum, limited to 3 minutes on any item. Ma'am.
I do have a handout.
You're very patient.
Well, this was very educational, thank you. Nice to see you, Charles. Do you remember me?
Maybe you'll be inspired to join one of our commissions.
Oh, I know. Well, the fire discussion was excellent. Excellent. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this morning. My name is Helen Higgins, and I live at 652 Nut Plains Road. Now we know. My views reflect those of an increasing number of Nut Plains State Street residents who are opposed to a concrete pathway along their roadways. Opposition is not fear of change, it's about process. How does a plan that has such widespread impacts on our residents, our landscape, our wetlands, and wildlife get pushed through without stakeholder analysis and input? One poorly publicized public information meeting does not constitute stakeholder input. At very least, the output from speakers at that meeting demonstrates that many are opposed. Some are in favor, and we can work this out. We are all in favor of making Nut Plains Road a safer road for pedestrians and bike riders. There are 2 grants that are involved in the Nut Plains Road project. The Local Transportation Capital Improvement Program, the LOPCIT grant, already awarded with surveys probably in progress, requires a bicycle and pedestrian needs assessment, and this assessment requires stakeholders, and this has not been done that I know of. The Transportation Alternatives Grant, which provides the federal funds for the pathway, appears to have been applied to because the money was available, minutes of the 10/17/16 BOS meeting, not because a serious analysis of need and advisability, a plan, was ever done. It was all anecdotal. Informing CONDOT that the town wants to go ahead with planning for the pathway under this grant program would not reflect the concerns of residents. It would be a preemptive strike that puts all of us on the defensive. The town, residents oppose, and residents for, rather than working together. Alternatives to trails and pathways are common along roads in Connecticut. CONDOT especially calls for careful planning in determining best placement for trails and bikeways. The CONDOT Complete Streets program is very clear that alternatives to trails and pathways are possible in order to make our roadways of almost equal accessibility to motorized and non-motorized users, a state goal. Complete Streets guidelines support alternative transportation concepts that are sensitive to the context of community character. Since there is currently no concrete plan for the Nut Plains pathway, now is a perfect opportunity to step back and do a full analysis of need and impacts of such a pathway and fully consider the alternatives. So I request that you, as members of the Board of Selectmen, vote to endorse creation of a stakeholder study committee to study the Nut Plains concept, including more public work sessions, and make a recommendation back to you. That committee make a recommendation back to you upon completion of its analysis and research. Please do not move this project forward without such an analysis. I recommend such a resolution be on the agenda of the next Board of Selectmen's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't think there's anybody else who wants to address the board, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody. Been quite